Imagine this: a 9-year-old boy, full of dreams and passion for sports, suddenly faces something no child should ever experience. During what should have been a simple practice, Lucas became the victim of a cruel, prejudiced remark by his own coach, a figure of authority who was supposed to protect and encourage him. It could have been the end of his confidence, but what happened next will surprise you. But before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from today. And if you enjoy stories with unexpected twists and life-changing moments, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Lucas was a boy full of energy, the kind of child who turns any space into a field of adventure. At just 9 years old, he was already seen as a promising talent in school sports, one of the best runners and impressively skilled with a ball. But despite all his dedication, there was something in the way his coach, Mr. Mendez, looked at him that Lucas could never quite understand. Every time their eyes met, Lucas felt uncomfortable, a certain indifference. He didn't know why. And on that fateful day, everything became clear in the worst way possible. During a soccer activity, Mr. Mendez, visibly impatient, made a remark that made Lucas' world crumble, a remark loaded with prejudice. The sound of those words felt like a punch. Lucas, who until then had been running with vigor and enthusiasm, stopped in the middle of the field. His classmates didn't immediately notice the impact the comment had, but Lucas knew, deep down, that something had changed forever. He looked at the coach, hoping it was some sort of misunderstanding, but Mr. Mendez didn't even bother to correct what he had said. The silence that followed the coach's words was suffocating. Lucas' heart, once full of emotion, now beat faster for an entirely different reason: the pain of being discriminated against by someone he admired so much. As the game went on, Lucas felt like he no longer belonged there. He, who had always been one of the most active kids, now stood motionless, unable to move, unable to react. Everything seemed distant. The words from Mr. Mendez echoed in his mind, like a sad song stuck on repeat. Every kick of the ball, every shout from his teammates on the field, all seemed drowned out by the echoes of the prejudice he had just suffered. Lucas wondered if something was wrong with him. Why would a coach, someone who was supposed to encourage, say something so cruel? The confidence Lucas always had in himself, in his abilities, and his place on the team began to crumble. The next few hours were a mix of confusion and sadness. Lucas knew he needed to tell someone what had happened, but he felt a strange sense of shame. He couldn't understand why he felt that way. After all, he hadn't done anything wrong. But that's how the pain of prejudice works. It eats away at you, making the victim question their own identity. Lucas spent the rest of the day in silence, avoiding talking to his friends, and when he got home, his mother, Mariana, immediately knew something was wrong. "What happened, my boy?" she asked softly, her voice full of concern. But Lucas just shook his head, not knowing where to begin. Mariana persisted, and little by little, between pauses and tears, Lucas told her what had happened. The shock in his mother's eyes was immediate. Mariana was a strong woman, always dedicated to defending children's rights, and hearing that her son had been the target of a prejudiced comment felt like a knife in her heart. Lucas, still shaken, began to cry as he recounted the details. Mr. Mendez's words were far too heavy for a boy his age to bear. "Did he really say that?" Mariana repeated, trying to process what she was hearing. But deep down, she already knew what needed to be done. The coach's comment could not go unpunished. As she listened to her son's story, Mariana was already thinking about the next steps. She knew that, in addition to comforting Lucas, she would have to take firm action to ensure this never happened again. Lucas' silence worried her even more. Her son, once so joyful and full of life, now seemed lost in dark thoughts. And that hurt her deeply. "You are not alone, my love," Mariana said, hugging Lucas tightly. The emotion of the moment brought tears to both their eyes. She knew this was the beginning of a long battle, but she was determined to fight with all the courage she had. The night passed slowly. Lucas could barely sleep, replaying the moment he heard Mr. Mendez's cruel words. He wondered why someone who was supposed to be an example of leadership and faith in every student's potential would act that way. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't find an answer. The pain ran deep, like an open wound that wouldn't heal. Mariana, on her part, spent the night awake, thinking about how to protect her son and, at the same time, seek justice. She knew Lucas needed support, but also that the coach needed to be held accountable. It wasn't just about Lucas, it was about all the children who could be affected by this kind of behavior. The next morning, Lucas got up still feeling down, but something was different in his posture. Even though he was still hurt, he knew his mother was on his side, and that gave him a little strength. At school, he avoided Mr. Mendez as much as possible. His friends didn't know what had happened, but could sense that something was wrong. The sparkle in Lucas' eyes was gone, and those who knew him noticed. But the worst was yet to come. During another sports activity, the coach once again completely ignored Lucas' efforts. It was as if the boy was invisible, and this attitude hurt him even more deeply. Lucas began to question whether he should stay on the team. The emotion and enthusiasm he once felt for sports were being replaced by sadness and insecurity. Every ignored comment, every time the coach left him out, felt like another blow to his self-esteem. He, who had always been brave, now feared standing out, afraid of being targeted by prejudice again. The sport, which had once been his great passion, now brought conflicting feelings. And even at such a young age, Lucas found himself facing a dilemma. Should he keep fighting, or give up on something he loved so much? But deep down, he knew he couldn't make that decision on his own. As the days passed, the situation at school continued to deteriorate for Lucas. The prejudice, which had started with a phrase, now manifested in other ways. Mr. Mendez seemed to have created an invisible barrier between himself and the boy. Lucas was no longer picked for main activities, and when he was, his achievements went unnoticed. This indifference ate him up inside. Every day felt like an emotional battle, and he felt like he was losing. The courage he once had was now shaken. And as the school environment became more hostile, Lucas withdrew more and more. The smiling, energetic boy was disappearing. But Mariana, observing everything, knew it was time to act. She couldn't let this painful experience destroy her son's spirit. Even though Lucas didn't know how to keep going, she knew they had to find a way to overcome this. The emotion of seeing her son suffer was devastating, but Mariana had something inside her that kept her moving. The certainty that love and unconditional support would be able to rebuild Lucas' confidence. And more importantly, she knew they needed to fight, not just for him, but for all the children who might go through similar situations. And that's when she decided the school needed to hear what had happened. Mariana had always been a woman of strong principles, someone who deeply believed in the importance of protecting and educating her children with love and respect. Upon hearing Lucas' story, her heart shattered. Seeing her son so emotionally hurt filled her with a mix of sadness and indignation. She knew she couldn't let this situation go unnoticed. "Lucas, you're perfect just the way you are," she said, holding his hands firmly. Emotion overcame both of them, and the boy, through tears, felt his mother's unwavering support. It was as if, in that moment, all of Mariana's love and compassion were focused on protecting her son. The first thing Mariana did was seek information about children's rights. She knew this incident had to be addressed properly, and the prejudice Lucas had faced could not be ignored. However, she also knew this fight wouldn't be easy. Confronting a respected coach and a school that might not want to deal with the situation was a challenge. But Mariana was determined. "You're not alone, my son. We're going to fight for justice together," she told Lucas. Her faith in their ability to change that reality was unshakable, and it started to bring a small spark of hope back into Lucas' eyes. In the days that followed, Mariana began to mobilize. She reached out to other mothers, sought legal advice, and even spoke with child psychologists to understand how she could help Lucas cope with the pain. Her love for her son was her greatest strength, and her courage to face the situation inspired everyone around her. "We will overcome this," she would say constantly as she spent hours thinking about how to make a difference. Every word of encouragement, every compassionate gesture she offered, was like a protective shield around Lucas, who, little by little, began to feel less alone in this battle. Pedro, Lucas' father, was also a key figure in this process. Upon hearing what had happened, he immediately stood by Mariana's side. Together, they formed a strong and united team, determined to protect their son in any way they could. Pedro was a man of few words, but his unwavering support was felt in every gesture, every hug he gave Lucas. "We're with you, son," he would repeat constantly. The love between the three was palpable, and that gave Lucas the strength he needed to face each day at school, knowing that his family was by his side every step of the way. Meanwhile, Mariana began outlining a plan to ensure that Lucas received the support he needed at school. She scheduled meetings with the administration, made sure to document everything that had happened, and demanded that action be taken. "I won't allow another child to go through what my son has endured," she said firmly as she spoke with other parents who also supported the cause. The fight wasn't just for Lucas, it was for all the children who could one day be victims of discriminatory behavior. Each day was a new battle, but Mariana remained steadfast, driven by courage and the love she felt for her son. One of the most emotional moments was when Mariana decided to write a letter to the school's administration. In that letter, she described in detail what had happened to Lucas and how it had impacted his life. The words she used were filled with emotion, but also with a firmness that made it clear she wouldn't accept anything less than justice. "My son has the right to respect and dignity, just like all other children," she wrote. The letter was delivered personally to the school's principal, and Mariana made it clear that she wouldn't stop until measures were taken to eradicate prejudice from the school environment. But Mariana knew this fight wouldn't just be on the administrative front. She was also deeply concerned about Lucas' emotional well-being. That's why she decided to seek psychological help for her son, something that could help him process what had happened and rebuild his confidence. "There's no shame in asking for help, Lucas. Sometimes we need someone to guide us through difficult times," she told him. The decision to find a child therapist was one of the best choices she could have made, as slowly, Lucas began to find ways to cope with his feelings, express his emotions, and, most importantly, understand that the prejudice he experienced didn't define who he was. During this process, Mariana also dedicated herself to strengthening the family bond. She knew Lucas needed to feel that, no matter what happened, his family would be his safe haven. On weekends, she planned activities that would help Lucas relax and momentarily forget the weight of school. "Shall we go to the park today?" she would suggest. And so, they would spend the day surrounded by nature, laughing, playing ball, and trying, if only for a few hours, to bring back the sparkle in Lucas' eyes. These moments were precious because that's when Lucas felt the unconditional presence of his parents, his greatest source of support and perseverance. Mariana's battle wasn't just legal or emotional, it was also a spiritual one. Her unwavering faith in justice and the power of family kept her standing, even when everything seemed difficult. She believed that with courage, perseverance, and love, they would overcome any obstacle. "Faith is what keeps us strong, Lucas. Believe me, we will get through this," she repeated constantly, and Lucas began to believe. Mariana became an example of how a mother's determination could move mountains, and that strength was crucial for Lucas to start seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. Another crucial point in this process was the support Mariana received from other mothers. She wasn't alone in this fight, and knowing that others believed in the importance of combating prejudice strengthened her even more. "We're with you, Mariana," they would say during meetings, in messages of support. Every word of encouragement made her feel more determined. This community support was essential for Mariana to keep the fight alive because, as she often said, "This is a battle we can't win alone." And so, the support network around Lucas grew stronger every day. As the school began to respond to Mariana's actions, she remained focused on ensuring that Lucas not only recovered from the trauma but also returned to being the joyful, lively boy he had always been. She knew the journey wouldn't be easy, but she was willing to take it, step by step, with love and compassion. "We will move forward, my son. No matter how difficult it gets, we will overcome," she said, with the certainty that, together, they could face any challenge. The fight was just beginning, but with Mariana's unwavering support, Lucas no longer felt alone. As days turned into weeks, the weight of Mr. Mendez's words began to take a toll on Lucas. What started as a single moment of discrimination slowly became an overwhelming presence in his mind. Lucas, who used to run joyfully across the field, now hesitated. His steps became slower, more uncertain. Every time he was called to participate in a school activity, a knot formed in his stomach. The passion he once had for sports was gradually fading, and it wasn't because he no longer loved it. It was because each time he stepped onto the field, he was reminded of how insignificant he had felt when Mr. Mendez made that comment. At school, it didn't take long for Lucas' friends to notice the change in his behavior. The once lively and enthusiastic boy who led the group during games was now distant and quiet. Lucas avoided eye contact, especially with Mr. Mendez, and even during practice sessions, he kept his head down. His teammates would ask, "Are you okay, Lucas?" But the boy could never find the words to express how he truly felt. The emotional weight of that experience was something he carried alone, and it began to affect not only his performance on the field, but also his sense of self-worth. Every time Lucas missed a shot or failed to keep up with his teammates, his mind immediately returned to that moment of prejudice. He started questioning whether he was good enough, whether he even deserved to be on the team. The excitement and joy he once found in scoring a goal or outrunning his peers were gone. Now, every mistake felt like proof that Mr. Mendez was right. The internal dialogue that played over and over in his head chipped away at the confidence he once had. Lucas, who used to be the embodiment of energy and courage, now felt small, defeated, and isolated. At home, Mariana and Pedro began noticing the changes in their son. Lucas had always been eager to share stories about his day at school, but now he avoided talking about it altogether. Whenever Mariana asked, "How was practice today?" Lucas would shrug or give a brief, "It was fine," before changing the subject. Pedro, although quieter in nature, could see the pain in his son's eyes. It broke their hearts to see Lucas, once so vibrant, slowly retreating into himself. They knew that something had to change, but they also knew that Lucas needed time to process what had happened in his own way. Despite the support of his parents, Lucas continued to struggle with his confidence. He began withdrawing from his friends, spending more time alone, and even started skipping some of the after-school practices he used to love. "What's the point?" he would think to himself. His heart wasn't in it anymore. The joy of being part of a team, of playing the sport he loved, was overshadowed by the constant reminder of that painful moment. Each time he saw Mr. Mendez, it was as if the wound reopened, and Lucas found it harder and harder to hold on to the passion that once defined him. Even in the classroom, Lucas' focus began to waver. Teachers noticed that the once attentive and eager student was now distracted, his mind elsewhere. His grades started slipping, and his enthusiasm for learning faded just as quickly as his love for sports. Mariana received calls from Lucas' teachers, expressing concern over his recent behavior. They didn't know the full story, but it was clear that something was deeply affecting him. For Lucas, it wasn't just about the sport anymore. It was about how that one comment from Mr. Mendez had seeped into every part of his life, casting a shadow over everything he once enjoyed. One day, during a particularly difficult practice, Mr. Mendez ignored Lucas again. While other students were praised for their efforts, Lucas' attempts went unnoticed. It was as if he had become invisible. The final blow came when Lucas, after summoning all his courage, attempted to lead his team during a drill, only to be completely disregarded by Mr. Mendez, who chose to focus on another student. Lucas felt the sting of rejection so deeply that, for the first time, he considered quitting the team altogether. The emotional burden was simply too much to bear, and he couldn't shake the feeling of being unworthy. When Lucas finally opened up to his parents about his desire to leave the team, Mariana and Pedro were both heartbroken but not surprised. They had seen the light in their son's eyes dim day by day, and while they didn't want him to quit something he loved, they also didn't want to force him into a situation that caused him so much pain. "Lucas, we love you no matter what you decide," Mariana said softly, holding his hand. "But remember, you have every right to be on that team, just like everyone else." Pedro nodded in agreement, offering his quiet but solid support. Lucas listened, but the doubt in his heart remained. As days passed, the internal conflict Lucas felt grew. Part of him longed to return to the days when soccer was his escape, where the field was a place of joy and freedom. But another part of him couldn't forget how small he felt every time he saw Mr. Mendez. The emotional scars ran deep, and Lucas struggled to reconcile his love for the game with the pain it now brought him. He began to question whether he could ever enjoy it again, or if the fear and insecurity would forever taint the sport that once brought him so much happiness. Despite everything, a small part of Lucas still held on to the hope that things could change. He remembered how proud he used to feel after every game, how his parents would cheer him on from the sidelines, and how his teammates looked up to him. That feeling, that sense of belonging, was something he desperately missed. But every time he considered returning to the field, the memory of Mr. Mendez's words crept back into his mind. It was a battle between his love for the game and the fear of being hurt again. And Lucas wasn't sure which side would win. Mariana, sensing her son's internal struggle, began to remind Lucas of his strengths. "You are so much more than what anyone says about you, Lucas. You have talent, and you have heart," she would say, hoping to rebuild his shattered confidence. She encouraged him to focus on the things that brought him joy outside of sports, but Lucas' passion for soccer was undeniable. It was part of who he was. "Maybe you just need a little break," Pedro suggested one evening, trying to offer a solution without pushing too hard. But deep down, they all knew that the decision had to come from Lucas. As time went on, Lucas started to slowly regain a bit of his old self. The support from his parents, along with their constant reassurance, began to plant seeds of courage within him. Though the scars from his experience with Mr. Mendez hadn't healed, Lucas started to entertain the idea that maybe, just maybe, he could return to the sport he loved on his own terms. "It's not about proving anything to Mr. Mendez," he thought to himself. "It's about proving something to myself." And with that realization, Lucas knew that his journey of healing had only just begun. Mariana and Pedro knew that standing up for Lucas was not only about comforting him at home, but about confronting the injustice head-on. They had given Lucas time to open up, but the weight of the situation had become unbearable for the entire family. One evening, after Lucas had gone to bed, Mariana turned to Pedro and said, "We have to do something. We can't let this continue." Pedro nodded silently, knowing that it was time to take action. The next day, they decided to confront Mr. Mendez and the school's administration, determined to make sure their son's voice was heard. The meeting was scheduled for a Wednesday afternoon. The tension in the air was palpable as Mariana and Pedro sat in the school office, waiting for the principal and Mr. Mendez to arrive. Lucas had chosen not to attend the meeting, but his parents were there on his behalf, armed with the truth and a firm resolve. As the door opened and Mr. Mendez walked in, followed by the principal, there was an undeniable sense of discomfort. Mariana, always the protector, felt her emotions stirring but kept her focus. "We're here because something unacceptable has happened," she began, her voice steady but laced with emotion. Mariana recounted, in great detail, the incident that had taken place on the field, ensuring that nothing was left unsaid. "My son was humiliated, and it has affected him deeply," she said, her voice growing more assertive with each word. Mr. Mendez, who had initially entered the room with a confident stance, began to shift uncomfortably in his seat. He tried to justify his actions, stating that Lucas had misunderstood his comment, but Mariana wasn't having any of it. "This isn't about misunderstanding," she said firmly. "This is about respect, something every child deserves, and Lucas was denied that." Pedro, though usually reserved, stepped in to support his wife. "Our son has lost his passion for something he once loved because of this incident. We need to know that the school is going to take this seriously." His calm but serious tone left little room for doubt about how deeply the situation had affected their family. The principal, caught between defending the school's reputation and addressing the serious complaint, hesitated before responding. "We will investigate the matter," the principal assured them, but Mariana knew that words weren't enough. She needed to see action. Mariana had come prepared. She handed over a formal letter of complaint, detailing everything Lucas had experienced and demanding that the school take appropriate measures. "This isn't just about Lucas. It's about ensuring that no other child has to go through this," she said, her eyes never leaving the principal's. The principal, though visibly uncomfortable, accepted the letter and promised a thorough investigation. Mr. Mendez, now looking more defensive, tried to downplay the situation, but Mariana's resolve didn't waver. "Your words may have been small to you, but they had a huge impact on my son," she said, making sure he understood the gravity of his actions. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with both sides exchanging points, but Mariana and Pedro stood their ground. The principal eventually agreed to place Mr. Mendez under temporary suspension pending the investigation, a small victory for Lucas' parents. It wasn't the end of the battle, but it was a step forward. As they left the meeting, Mariana felt a sense of relief but also a lingering sense of injustice. She knew that one suspension wouldn't erase the pain Lucas had endured, but it was a necessary step toward holding the school accountable. Back at home, they explained to Lucas what had happened during the meeting. He listened quietly, processing everything his parents told him. "They're taking action, Lucas," Mariana said softly, sitting next to him. "We stood up for you, and we're not going to stop until this is resolved." Lucas, though still shaken, felt a small spark of hope ignite within him. Knowing that his parents were fighting for him gave him a sense of comfort, even if the situation still felt overwhelming. It was the first time in weeks that Lucas felt he wasn't carrying the burden alone. Over the next few days, the school began its formal investigation. Teachers and students were interviewed, and the atmosphere around Mr. Mendez changed. Word spread quickly that the coach had been suspended, and many students, though unsure of the details, began to question his behavior. Lucas noticed the shift, too. He no longer saw Mr. Mendez at practice, and while it didn't immediately fix his confidence, it brought a small sense of justice. His parents' courage in confronting the school had made a difference, and Lucas realized that his pain was being taken seriously. As the investigation unfolded, Mariana and Pedro stayed in constant communication with the school. They weren't going to let the issue fade away. They knew that in many cases, schools tried to sweep incidents like this under the rug, but they were determined to prevent that. Mariana even reached out to other parents, sharing Lucas' story in an effort to raise awareness about the importance of addressing discrimination at school. "We can't let this happen to anyone else's child," she would say, finding support among the community. The fight was no longer just for Lucas. It was for every student who had ever felt marginalized. The school administration, feeling the pressure from both Mariana and the growing support from other parents, began to take the issue more seriously. The investigation progressed faster than expected, and soon, Mr. Mendez was officially removed from his coaching position. It was a victory, but not without its emotional toll. Lucas still had a long way to go in rebuilding his confidence, but knowing that the man who had caused him so much pain was no longer in a position of power gave him some peace. Mariana and Pedro, though relieved by the outcome, knew that this was just one battle in a much larger war. In the end, the confrontation with the administration wasn't just about getting justice for Lucas. It was about setting a precedent for the future. Mariana and Pedro had shown their son that standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, is always worth it. And though the road ahead would still be challenging, they had taken the first step in making sure no other child would have to go through what Lucas had experienced. "This is just the beginning," Mariana said one evening as they sat together as a family. "We're going to keep fighting, for Lucas and for every kid out there." After the confrontation with the school administration, Mariana and Pedro knew their fight wasn't over. The suspension of Mr. Mendez was only one part of the journey. Now, their focus turned to helping Lucas rebuild his self-esteem, while also ensuring that no other child would suffer from similar discrimination. "We're not just fighting for you, Lucas," Mariana said one evening. "We're fighting for every child who's ever felt like they don't belong." Lucas listened quietly, still processing everything that had happened. He understood the importance of what his parents were doing, but it didn't change the pain he still felt inside. At home, the family began to focus on healing. Mariana and Pedro worked tirelessly to rebuild Lucas' confidence. They spent time together as a family, engaging in activities that Lucas loved. Whether it was playing soccer in the park or watching his favorite movies, they made sure Lucas knew he was loved and supported. "You're not defined by what anyone says about you," Pedro would remind Lucas. "You're defined by how you treat others and how you face challenges." These words, though simple, began to resonate with Lucas. Slowly but surely, he started to feel the warmth of his family's love filling the cracks in his self-esteem. Mariana also took proactive steps to educate Lucas about the power of self-respect and resilience. She would sit with him in the evenings, talking about famous figures who had faced discrimination and overcome it. "Look at Martin Luther King Jr., she said one evening. "He faced so much hate, but he never let it stop him from fighting for what was right." These stories began to inspire Lucas, showing him that even though the world could be unfair, there was always a way to rise above it. The more he learned about these figures, the more Lucas started to see that his worth wasn't determined by others' opinions. But the fight wasn't just about emotional recovery. It was also about ensuring that the school environment became a safer place for all children. Mariana and Pedro continued to engage with the school administration, pushing for long-term changes in policy. "We can't let this end with Mr. Mendez's suspension," Mariana said during one of the meetings. "There needs to be a lasting change." The principal, now fully aware of the gravity of the situation, agreed to work with them on implementing new policies. This included training sessions for staff on how to handle discrimination and bias, as well as creating a more inclusive curriculum for students. The fight for respect extended beyond the school walls. Mariana began to reach out to other parents, encouraging them to share their experiences and advocate for their children. "If we don't speak up, things will never change," she would say in parent meetings. Her passion for the cause began to inspire others, and soon, a group of parents formed, united by the common goal of ensuring that their children would grow up in an environment of respect and equality. These meetings became a place of solidarity, where parents shared their fears, frustrations, and hopes for a better future for their kids. For Lucas, seeing his parents fight so hard for him and for others was both comforting and empowering. "Why are you doing all this?" he asked one day, curious about the lengths his parents were going to. Mariana smiled and responded, "Because we believe in a better world, Lucas. And it starts with us." That response stayed with Lucas. He realized that this fight wasn't just about him. It was about creating a space where every child could feel safe, respected, and valued. The love and courage his parents showed became his foundation, helping him regain the confidence he had lost. As the months passed, Lucas slowly started to regain his passion for soccer. With the support of his parents and friends, he returned to the field. His first practice back wasn't easy. The memories of what had happened with Mr. Mendez still lingered, but Lucas pushed through, determined not to let fear dictate his actions. "I'm proud of you, Lucas," Pedro said after that first practice. "It takes real courage to get back out there." Lucas smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment. It wasn't just about soccer, it was about reclaiming a part of himself that had been taken away. Mariana and Pedro's efforts didn't go unnoticed by the school community. Other parents, teachers, and even students began to acknowledge the positive changes that were taking place. The new policies implemented by the school created a safer and more respectful environment, and it was clear that the changes were making a difference. "Your family made this happen," one parent told Mariana at a school event. "Because of you, our kids are safer." Mariana smiled, grateful that their fight had brought about real change, but she knew that the fight for respect was ongoing. It wasn't something that could be solved overnight. At home, Lucas continued to heal, but there were still moments of doubt. "What if it happens again?" he asked one evening. Mariana, always honest with her son, responded, "It might. But now you know how strong you are. You know that you can face it, and you're not alone." Those words gave Lucas the reassurance he needed. He knew that no matter what happened in the future, he had the strength to face it, and more importantly, he had his family by his side. The fight for respect had taught him that true strength comes from standing up for yourself and others, no matter how difficult it might seem. Pedro, though quieter in his approach, also played a crucial role in Lucas' recovery. He would take Lucas on long walks, just the two of them, talking about life and the challenges that come with it. "Life's going to throw a lot of obstacles your way, son," Pedro would say. "But you have the courage to overcome them." These moments between father and son became a source of comfort for Lucas. It was during these walks that Lucas began to feel a renewed sense of confidence, knowing that no matter what happened, he had the tools to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the family continued their fight for respect, they also celebrated the small victories along the way. Lucas' confidence grew, and his passion for soccer returned in full force. He was no longer the boy who had been hurt by Mr. Mendez's words. He was now a boy who knew his worth and who had learned the importance of standing up for himself. "We did it, Lucas," Mariana said one day after another successful practice. "We fought for you, and you fought for yourself." Lucas smiled, knowing that his family's unwavering support had given him the strength to rise above the pain. In the end, the family's fight for respect wasn't just about addressing one incident, it was about creating lasting change. Mariana and Pedro had shown Lucas that true courage comes from standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. And while the journey wasn't easy, it was worth it. "Respect is something you earn," Pedro told Lucas one day. "And by standing up for yourself and others, you've earned more respect than you'll ever know." Lucas nodded, feeling a deep sense of pride. The fight for respect was far from over, but together they had already won the most important battle. After the confrontation with Mr. Mendez and the school's administration, a significant shift began to take place within the institution. The events surrounding Lucas had sparked something bigger, and the school could no longer ignore the call for change. Mariana's persistence, along with the support of other parents, had pushed the administration to take real steps toward creating a more inclusive and respectful environment. It started with a simple announcement. The school would be implementing new policies to ensure that every student, regardless of their background, would feel safe and respected. It was a small victory, but it marked the beginning of a transformation. The first major change came in the form of training sessions for the teachers and staff. The administration introduced mandatory workshops focused on inclusivity, equality, and how to handle situations of discrimination. Mr. Mendez's behavior had exposed a deeper issue within the school's culture, an issue that had likely gone unchecked for too long. "We need to do better," the principal admitted during one of the sessions. Teachers were taught not only to recognize discriminatory behavior, but also how to address it in a way that supported the students affected. It was the beginning of a much-needed cultural shift within the school. For Lucas, returning to school after the incident felt different. The atmosphere, once filled with uncertainty and fear, now felt a little more open. He noticed the changes, even if they were subtle at first. Teachers seemed more attentive to the needs of the students, and there was a growing emphasis on creating a safe and supportive environment. His classmates, too, had started to become more aware of how their words and actions could affect others. Lucas no longer felt invisible. He was beginning to regain a sense of belonging. The transformation wasn't just administrative. It was something that touched the hearts of the students, too. One of the most significant changes came with the introduction of new school programs aimed at fostering respect and empathy among students. The administration launched a campaign called Respect Starts Here, which included weekly assemblies where students could openly discuss issues related to respect, inclusion, and fairness. Lucas, although still hesitant to speak up in front of large groups, found comfort in knowing that these conversations were happening. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about creating a school where everyone felt valued. The campaign encouraged students to share their own experiences and work together to build a stronger community. The school also introduced a peer mentorship program, pairing older students with younger ones to provide guidance and support. Lucas was paired with an older student named Raphael, who had faced his own challenges with discrimination in the past. Raphael became a role model for Lucas, showing him that it was possible to overcome adversity and still find joy in life. "It's not about forgetting what happened," Raphael told Lucas during one of their meetings. "It's about using it to grow stronger." These words resonated deeply with Lucas, who had been struggling to understand how he could move forward after everything that had happened. As time went on, the transformation within the school became more apparent. The conversations about respect and inclusion were no longer confined to the classroom. They extended to the hallways, the playground, and even the lunchroom. Students began to hold each other accountable, calling out inappropriate behavior when they saw it. The shift in culture was tangible, and Lucas could feel the difference. "It's like people actually care now," he told his parents one evening. Mariana and Pedro smiled, proud of the changes that were taking place. They knew that while the battle hadn't been easy, it was worth it to see their son in an environment where respect was finally being prioritized. The transformation wasn't just about policies and programs. It was about the way the school community began to view one another. Teachers were more engaged with their students, taking the time to listen and understand their individual struggles. There was a renewed sense of compassion that hadn't existed before. The school also began recognizing students who exemplified the values of respect and kindness. Lucas, to his surprise, was one of the first students to receive this recognition. The principal, during an assembly, praised Lucas for his courage and resilience. "Lucas has shown us all what it means to stand up for what's right," she said, and for the first time in months, Lucas felt proud of himself. Even outside of the classroom, the changes were evident. The school organized a sports day dedicated to promoting teamwork and respect among students. It was a symbolic gesture, but it meant the world to Lucas. During the event, Students from different grades came together to participate in various activities, emphasizing cooperation over competition. Lucas, who had been hesitant to rejoin the soccer team after the incident with Mr. Mendez, found himself slowly reconnecting with his love for the game. The atmosphere was different now. There was no pressure, no judgment, just pure enjoyment of the sport. The transformation in the school wasn't just temporary. It had become part of the school's identity. New students who joined were introduced to the school's commitment to respect and inclusion from day one. The administration made sure that the lessons learned from Lucas' experience weren't forgotten. "We're building something lasting," the principal told the parents during a meeting. "We want to make sure that every child who comes through our doors feels safe, valued, and respected." Mariana, sitting in the audience, felt a sense of pride. The fight for Lucas had turned into something much larger, a fight for the future of the entire school. Lucas, though still healing from the experience, began to thrive in this new environment. His confidence returned, little by little, and he found himself reconnecting with friends he had distanced himself from. The fear and insecurity that had once dominated his thoughts began to fade, replaced by a sense of belonging and acceptance. "You've come so far, Lucas," Mariana said one evening as they walked home from school. "You helped change this place." Lucas smiled, knowing that while the journey hadn't been easy, it had been worth it. The school had transformed, and so had he. The transformation in the school wasn't just about fixing the problems of the past, it was about building a better future. The changes that had been made created a foundation of respect, compassion, and inclusion that would benefit generations of students to come. Lucas' story had become a catalyst for change, and while it had started with pain, it ended with hope. "This is just the beginning," Pedro said one day as they discussed the future. And Lucas knew he was right. The transformation in the school was a reminder that even in the face of adversity, change is always possible when people come together to fight for what's right. As the dust began to settle after the transformation within the school, Lucas' story started to gain traction beyond the school's walls. What had begun as a painful experience of discrimination turned into something much larger, a movement for change. Other students, who had once remained silent about their own struggles, began to speak up. Lucas' courage had opened a door, and now many felt empowered to share their experiences, knowing they weren't alone. Lucas had become an unintentional symbol of resilience, showing his peers that, despite the challenges, it was possible to rise above adversity. It wasn't long before parents, teachers, and even local community leaders began to recognize the importance of what Lucas had sparked. At first, it was small gestures, notes from other parents thanking Mariana and Pedro for their efforts, or students approaching Lucas to tell him how much his bravery meant to them. "You made a difference," one of his classmates said one day after school. "I was afraid to talk about what I went through, but now I know it's okay to speak up." These words gave Lucas a sense of pride he hadn't felt in a long time. He hadn't set out to change anything, but his experience had impacted many lives. The school administration, too, acknowledged Lucas' role in the changes that had taken place. The principal invited him to be part of a student council initiative aimed at promoting inclusion and respect throughout the school. Lucas, though initially hesitant, agreed to participate. "You're already a leader, Lucas," his mother told him. "Now you just get to show it." The council meetings became a safe space for students to voice their concerns and work together to build a more positive school culture. Lucas found himself speaking up more, sharing his thoughts on how to make the school a better place for everyone. One of the most impactful moments came when Lucas was asked to share his story at a school assembly. Standing in front of his peers, teachers, and parents, Lucas felt a mix of nerves and excitement. "I didn't think my story would matter to anyone," he began, his voice steady but soft. "But I learned that what we go through can help others." As Lucas shared his experience of being discriminated against, the room fell silent. His honesty, vulnerability, and strength touched everyone present. By the time he finished speaking, there wasn't a single person in the room who hadn't been moved by his words. The ripple effect of Lucas' story didn't stop at the school assembly. Soon, his story was shared at community events, and other schools in the district began to take notice. Educators from neighboring schools reached out to learn more about the changes Lucas' school had implemented, hoping to replicate the same programs. "Your courage is making waves, Lucas," Mariana said one evening. "It's not just about our school anymore. It's about changing the way schools everywhere treat their students." Lucas hadn't anticipated that his experience would reach so far, but he realized that his pain had led to something truly meaningful. As Lucas' confidence grew, so did his ability to connect with others who had faced similar challenges. He became someone his peers could turn to, whether it was to talk about discrimination or other difficulties they were facing. "It's okay to be scared," he would tell them. "But it's not okay to stay silent when you're being treated unfairly." His words resonated with many students, and Lucas found that his own healing was tied to helping others heal as well. The more he shared, the more he realized that his story wasn't just about him. It was about everyone who had ever felt like they didn't belong. Outside of school, Lucas' impact continued to grow. Mariana and Pedro were invited to speak at parent meetings and community forums about the importance of standing up for children's rights. "Lucas showed us what true courage looks like," Pedro said at one event. "And now it's our responsibility as parents to make sure our children feel safe and supported." Their words inspired other families to take action, and soon, discussions about discrimination and respect became a regular part of community conversations. Lucas' experience had sparked a movement that went beyond just fixing a problem. It had created a platform for lasting change. As the school year progressed, Lucas found himself becoming more involved in extracurricular activities, something he had once shied away from. He joined the school soccer team again, but this time, it wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about doing something he loved. The fear and anxiety that had once held him back were replaced by a quiet confidence. His teammates noticed the change, too. "You're playing better than ever, Lucas," one of his friends said after practice one day. "It's like you're not scared anymore." Lucas smiled, knowing that his journey wasn't about being fearless, but about finding the courage to keep going despite the fear. The transformation in Lucas wasn't just internal, it was visible to everyone around him. He walked through the school hallways with his head held high, no longer weighed down by the fear of being judged or mistreated. His teachers noticed the change in his demeanor, and his classmates saw the quiet strength he now carried. "You're different, Lucas," one of his friends said during lunch one day. "In a good way." Lucas nodded, knowing that he had grown in ways he hadn't anticipated. The challenges he had faced had shaped him into someone who could handle whatever came next. By the end of the school year, Lucas' positive impact had spread far and wide. His story was no longer just about a boy who had faced discrimination, it was about a boy who had used that experience to create change. The school had been transformed, students were more mindful of how they treated each other, and the community had rallied behind the cause of respect and inclusion. Lucas had become a symbol of perseverance and courage, not because he had set out to be, but because he had refused to give up. "You've made a difference, Lucas," Mariana said one evening as they reflected on the year. "And that's something no one can ever take away from you." Looking back on everything that had happened, Lucas realized that his journey had only just begun. There would always be challenges to face, but now he knew that he had the strength to overcome them. His story had inspired others to speak up, and in doing so, it had created a ripple effect of change that would continue long after the school year ended. "This isn't the end," Lucas thought to himself. "It's just the beginning." And with that realization, Lucas walked into the future, knowing that his impact would continue to grow, not just for himself, but for everyone around him. Now that you've followed Lucas' journey, Let me ask you, how are you standing up for respect in your own life? Every day, we face choices about whether to stay silent or speak out. Luca's story teaches us that even in the face of injustice, we have the power to create change. Are you willing to take a stand, not only for yourself but for those around you? Respect doesn't just happen. It's something we fight for, something we earn through our actions. So, what will you do differently today to foster respect and fairness in your world? If Lucas, at just 9 years old, can inspire an entire school to change, imagine what you can do in your own community. Maybe it's time to reflect on how you can be more compassionate, more inclusive, and more courageous. Whether it's speaking up when you see someone being mistreated or supporting those who need a voice, your actions can make a lasting difference. So, what are you waiting for? Take that first step today. And if you want to keep learning about how to create a more respectful and just world, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss out on important stories like this one, stories that can inspire you to take action. Let's continue this journey together, because change starts with all of us. You have the power to make a difference, just like Lucas did. Let's make it happen.